It was Greta who scraped up the ash, blood, and lung paste out of the fireplace and onto a china plate. We set Graham up in the parlor at a small table and chair. William disappeared, then came back with a silver fork and a cloth napkin. We watched solemnly as Graham prepared for his grim feast. He looked down at the rancid mixture before him. "Are we sure this is what the note meant?" he asked shakily, his face tinged green. "It seems extreme." "This freak embalmed my father," Anders said with frustration. "If anyone has an affinity for the extreme, it's them." Graham picked up his fork with a trembling hand. Very carefully, he stabbed the prongs into a spongy cube of lung, and stringy bits hung down as he lifted it towards his face. His eyes scanned around at the small crowd, witnessing his suffering. "You're wasting your time, you know. We only have until dawn to find all these damn jars." "He's right," William said, nodding gravely. "We found one, which means there are 6 left. Our best bet is to split up and search each room of the house." Immediately, pairs began to form. Of course, Fawn and Forrest stepped even closer to one another than they had already been previously. Wendy, oddly, immediately placed herself beside William. Ander, shooting me another suspicious glare, awkwardly stepped next to Greta, who looked less than pleased. I stood there, alone, feeling even more out of place than I already was. The others and I stared at one another for a moment until William took pity on me. "Sam," he said, "why don't you examine the master bedroom with Fawn and Forrest?" The twins shot William identical, reproachful looks, and honestly, I wasn't much of a fan of this setup either. "That's okay," I said. "I can look on my own." William shook his head. "I think it would be best if you didn't." There was something mildly threatening in his air. Like, even though Ander was the one who had put words to his suspicions of me, he hadn't been the only one thinking it. William Pettigrew turned back towards the man still seated and shaking at the table. "Graham," he said quietly. Graham, hand still frozen around his fork, tore his eyes up from the monstrosity on his plate to look at William. "You'll find me when you're done?" Graham nodded. A haunted, hollow nod. And so, as the other groups drifted off to various corners of the large home, Fawn, Forrest, and I were upstairs, searching one of the fanciest bedrooms I'd ever seen. A dead man's bedroom. There was complete and utter silence until Fawn spoke. "Forrest, I already checked there." The male twin closed the drawer of the tall mahogany dresser that he was peering into. He looked at his sister, who was standing on her toes, searching the top of the closet. "Well, I already looked there," he said with exasperation. Fawn stepped out of the closet with a huff. "Must be that psychological twin link people are always talking about," I said nervously, trying to lighten the tension. They didn't even glance in my direction. "This is ridiculous," Fawn muttered, moving over to the wardrobe. "This is why you have at least one kid. So that you don't need an elaborate will reading that gets hijacked by an insane person. Just one direct blood relative that you leave all of your stuff to." "So the people who are here are the only family Regis had?" I asked tentatively. Forrest gave a heavy sigh. "He wasn't much of a people person. Our parents only made him our godfather because they wanted a bigger donation to their foundation," he said with a humorless laugh. "Majority of his family's dead, so yes, his only family's here." Then his eyes narrowed into my direction. Plus a few extras, apparently. I gave him a weak smile. Graham, Greta, and William aren't really family either. Yes, but they at least knew the man. The hostility in the room was rising, and I didn't like it. Not because I don't enjoy conflict, although I don't, but for one specific fact. Either one of these people could be a deranged murderer. It might be a stretch, given their young age, but teenagers can be killers too, and something told me that if one twin was behind it, the other wasn't going to be innocent. Well, Wendy didn't know him. She was born after he died, I wagered. Blood is blood, Fawn said forcefully. It's the most important bond there is. She and Forrest exchanged a brief look. At this point, I was getting annoyed. My irritation fueled by the fact that time was ticking away faster than I would have liked, and the distrust and suspicion that was being thrust upon me. You know, we're all in the same boat here, I said. I didn't want to get that creepy video, and I definitely didn't want to be a part of this bizarre murder mystery party. I bent down to the floor to search under the bed, but there was nothing there. When I brought my head back up, the twins had both stopped rifling the room. Instead, they were staring at me, confusion on their face. What? I asked, my face flushed. We didn't get any video. My heart started beating faster, and I got up from the floor. The video. The one where Regis kind of rambles on about Egyptomania and how he's going to be embalmed? I looked anxiously into each of their faces, but there was no hint of recognition. It was basically the invitation to this party. 25 years after his death, he wanted to have us all watch his unwrapping. Still nothing? You didn't get a copy? The twins both shook their heads. They seemed less frustrated than they had been before. Now they just look scared. We got paper invitations through the mail. It was totally normal. Calligraphy and stationery, Fawn said. And when was this video from? Forrest asked with hesitation. The footage was grainy and the tape skipped about every 7 seconds, but I could still see the old man on the screen, the timestamp that read August 5th, 1998, and I could hear it very clearly when he spoke. Congratulations, you've been cordially invited to the last unwrapping party on Earth. Something didn't make sense. The video was from 1998. William Pettigrew, when he first addressed the crowd before we found out how big of a mess that we were in, he said, "It's a great honor to be able to fulfill his greatest wish, 22 years after his death." It was from 1998, I said quietly. 22 years ago. How had I not noticed? It was impossible for the party to be taking place 25 years after Regis died, since I had seen him in a 22-year-old video. Something else. Regis Hannigan had to have died soon after making that tape. The twins and I stood shocked, pensive silence. I stared at the floor beneath my feet, trying to make sense of what I'd learned. The air hung around us, quiet and empty, and then I lifted my head, expecting their gazes of accusation to be even more potent than they had been before this new discovery. But they weren't looking at me. Instead, their eyes were aimed at something behind me. I followed their stares and turned to see the object of their attention. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, there it suddenly was. The lamp on the bedside table, which was off, glinted a familiar gold in the overhead light. I soon realized it wasn't a lamp at all. Quickly, I lifted off the shade, which had merely been propped on the jar's lid. Though the smooth side had been facing out, I turned it over quickly to reveal what lay on the other side. As soon as we saw who was in the photograph, the jar was snatched from my hands. Fawn grabbed it quickly, and she and Forrest were now staring at it in despair. And I understood why. Again, there were two images on the second canopic jar. One, the engraving of a human head in Egyptian style. Another, a photograph of Fawn, smiling brightly with her arm wrapped around Forrest's shoulders. Fawn had the lid off the jar in record time. The unfortunately familiar smell drifted immediately up and out of the jar, and I thought of poor Graham downstairs. I wondered if he managed to take that first bite yet. Before anyone could speak, Fawn's arm was elbow deep in a scarlet mixture of blood and organ. She felt around for a moment, then pulled it back out. The jar fell easily from her grasp and onto the floor. The sludge stood out stark against her skin, like one long velvet glove. Held in her grip was another blood-smeared plastic bag, labeled jar Number 4. She opened it, and with her clean hand pulled out the contents. First, the photograph. When Fawn and Forrest saw it, there was a change in their expressions from apprehension to horror. Slowly, I crept up behind the two in order to see what they had uncovered. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, though I'm not sure what I had expected. It was a car. A bright, shiny classic one, with the rounded hubcaps and light blue paint. It was parked in a driveway on a sunny day. I didn't see anything nefarious about it, but if Graham's jar had been any indication, the story behind it was going to be a grim one. Fawn reached out a blood-stained finger, gently stroked the edge of the photograph, dyeing it red. "Ferris," she murmured softly. "Who's Ferris?" I asked carefully. Forrest's mouth hardened into a set jaw straight line. "We're triplets," he said tersely. "Ferris was our brother." I tried to hide my surprise and spoke slowly. "Was?" Neither of the siblings said anything. Forrest wordlessly took the folded paper from Fawn and unfurled it. Inside, just like before, was a scarlet envelope. He removed it and read from the paper first. "Fawn and Forrest Jacoby, confess your sins. After your confession, open the envelope. Accept your punishment." "It's for both of you?" I asked quickly, a bleak realization gradually dawning on me. "Both our pictures are on the front," Fawn answered, still gazing deeply into the photograph of the car. She didn't even glance up as Forrest opened the red envelope. "When difficult to choose a direction, choose a space within the center of yourself." A remarkably similar expression suddenly crossed the faces of each of the strangers before me. A look of anxiety, of worry, of sadness, and of fear. If I had to give it a name, it would be guilt. Then they snapped their heads to the side, one to the right, one to the left, as they both looked at one another in absolute fury. In perfect unison, they growled, "What did you do?" Neither had the opportunity to answer, because suddenly there came a great crash from downstairs. We ran down the steps, Forrest with the notes from the jar, Fawn with the photograph of the strange car still clutched in her bloodied fist. Back in the parlor, much was the same as when we had left it. There, the sarcophagus lay open, and Adler's father still remained shriveled and musty within it. The plate, the one with the mixture of ash and lung that had been set before Graham Willoughby, still sat on a small table, apparently mostly untouched. But the man himself, Graham, was gone. "Graham?" Forrest called out. "In here," a voice responded, and we ran to it. In the foyer, beside the great wooden door I had walked through when I had arrived at the Harrington house, was a lifeless body laying still on a rug. Standing over it were two people, William Pettigrew and Greta McIntyre, looking shocked and appalled. "What happened?" I asked with panic. William answered, his voice low and grave. "He must have tried to leave." I walked slowly, feet squeaking against the floorboards, over to the spot on the floor where the body lay. Immediately, I felt the burning sensation of bile rising up in my throat. The body had no head. It wasn't a clean cut either. The edges of the neck were ragged like fabric frayed at a ripped seam. From up close, I could see that the body wasn't on a rug at all. The blood seeped from its newly formed stump of a neck had merely formed a circle around him. I wanted so badly to avert my eyes, but something had caught my attention, something glimmering brass on the body's torso. The silence was so hushed in the foyer, interrupted by one less heartbeat, that I could hear something else instead. The ticking of a pocket watch, sitting cold on Graham Willoughby's still chest. The message was clear, but someone had gone to the trouble of leaving a note anyway. It was written not on paper, like those in the jars, but instead was scrawled on a piece of embroidered fabric, a handkerchief with 3 initials stitched in it. R-W-H. And a brief message written in something red and flecked with ash. You're running out of time. Hey there once again, kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video, or, listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. Before we say goodnight, I'd like to let you guys know about a couple of books that are available right now if you guys check out Amazon, before it becomes too late to get them and they're completely sold out. The Neverglade Mysteries Volume 3 should be available on Amazon very, very soon. If you guys have been keeping up with the Neverglade Mysteries, then you definitely don't want to miss out on this one. This is going to be the brand newest book, and the adventures of the inspector cannot be missed. The complete version of My Tiny Town Just Got Put on Lockdown is available right now on Amazon as well. Big, thick hardcover book, and you guys can get all the adventures as well as some insight into the next volume that should be available in that series. And of course, there's 2 new audiobooks from me. Tales from the Gas Station Volume 3 is available on Audible, and you can check out the newest Audible book from Vincent Vinicava, Pastel-Colored Dreams and Human-Flavored Nightmares. Both of those, very fun to work on, and I hope all of you guys enjoy them. And as always, I want to give a very huge thank you to all of my supporters out there on Patreon. I say this every time, but I truly mean it. You guys are the real MVPs, and without you, I don't think I would be able to continue doing this at the capacity that I do, especially not as many brand new custom stories as we've been getting just for the channel. So a very special thank you to Jacob Schaefer, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Bryon Arce, Ken Lando Higuchi, Bobby Karman, Stephanie Butler, Tristain Pelton, Chase Burnett, Diana Kraus, Nessie, Ronnie Hansen, Blitzscreed, BardoHawk764, The Banana Mafia 1, Hollow Hero, Ferb, Harley, Billy Morrow, Katie Birch, Sashi Sazaku, Kayden the Spooky Boy, My Body Sounds Like Rice Krispies, Ashwood, Lord of the Weebs, Jay, Faya Lockett, Miss Exandra, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Ozreen Fox, Robert White, Legit Quad Feed, Fried Chicken 12, James Bruce, Freddy Krueger, Ty Nanny, Infernal One, James Lowe, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Jordan Nels, Hades' Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Tommy Green, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Nina Smith, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Paulson, Trace Miles, and Corey Kenshin. Thank you guys once again so much, and if you would like to join this list of people's names that I mispronounce, or the list of people's names that are down there in the description, check out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And as always, a very sweet dreams to all of you. Good night, folks.